It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. The third screen popping up. You know what that means. It's DB time. Steelers DB. Derrick Bell joining the podcast. Look at that scenery in the background, too. Down at Latrobe, St. Vincent College, Steelers training camp. DB, how we feeling?
Yeah, shout out. I'm trying to channel my inner Chris Carter. It's not a pool in the Bahamas, but you know, it's something. I'm just embracing the nature. Yeah, embracing the nature scenery down here in Latrobe. But I'm doing good, man. I'm super excited. Yesterday's practice was awesome. And I'm ready for Friday Night Lights for sure.
We actually got a question specifically about Friday Night Lights, so we can dive into that a little bit too. Alan, how are we feeling over there?
I'm doing good. Derrick and I, for full disclosure, he's about like 12 yards that way. We're just on opposite sides of the wall here at our Airbnb. But yeah, man, doing good. You know, been a really good week of practice, I think. I feel like I learned a lot. And yeah, man, just ready to get after it.
There we go. So today's episode got a lot of questions. We almost did like a mailbag type thing from X, couple things from YouTube. But Alan, I want to start first and foremost before we dive into that stuff. You put out a post on X about the Houston Texans wide receivers, why Steelers fans should be watching them closely in that Hall of Fame game. There could be somebody playing in that game that certainly is going to be on the roster bubble, potentially cut. We know how many NFL quality wide receivers there currently are on the Houston Texans. And you got a lot of replies on that post.
Yeah, people don't seem very enthusiastic about digging through the Houston Texans scrap heap for wide receiver help. And I hate to break it to those people, that is like a top tier outcome in terms of potential Steelers wide receiver additions at this point. Like if they can find a way to get Noah Brown or John Mechie or Xavier Hutchinson off of the Texans, who would be probably their like 4, 5, and 6 receivers right now, or 4, 5, and 7, depending on where you put Robert Woods. That's better than anybody else I see them getting. So I don't know. A lot of people were not very enthused by that suggestion, but that's pretty much the top of the available market, especially with yesterday's news of DeAndre Hopkins out 4 to 6 weeks with a knee injury. I think that pretty clearly takes Treylon Burks off the table. I don't know, unless you really want Juju. It's not getting better.
Brother. Yeah, well, DeAndre Hopkins is out 4 to 6 weeks because of a knee injury. Juju's been out for a couple of years now because of a knee injury, basically. So, yeah, I'm with the Texans thing. I love Noah. I wanted the Steelers to sign Noah Brown. I was very upset he went back to Houston. Things changed though. They got Stephon Diggs since then. Ben Scarona came over from the Rams, so maybe he isn't in their plans going forward. Derrick, what's your take on the state of the Houston Texans receiver room, and if one of those guys could be an addition to this room?
Yeah, I mean, a Noah Brown trade would be cause for like an emergency podcast, because I would be extremely excited about that. Brown's got inside-outside versatility, really tough physical wide receiver. Fun fact, he was fourth last year in yards per catch in the NFL, averaged over 17 yards per catch, tons of explosive plays on his tape. But I really like him against zone coverage. And, you know, the Steelers are going to see a lot of zone coverage this year with Arthur Smith's offense, I think. But you mentioned some of the other names, Alan, like John Mechie, a guy who missed his rookie season, unfortunately, with some health stuff. But, you know, he played sparingly last year. I was really impressed with him as a blocker when they played the Steelers last year. And one of the main reasons I think that all of the Texans receivers are incredible blockers is because of Robert Woods being in that room. Woods has always been one of the NFL's best in that regard for a run-heavy team. I think he makes some sense, even though, you know, he's like 32, 33 years old now. So, I mean, he's definitely like, you know, not in his prime anymore. But, you know, he's another potential option. And even like Xavier Hutchinson, if I remember correctly, the Steelers had some interest in him through the pre-draft process. But kind of like what you mentioned, I mean, their top 3 receivers are so good. I mean, they have one of the best receiver rooms top to bottom, but you got Diggs, Collins, and even Tank Dell. Like, it's going to be hard to find like targets for the rest of those guys. And one or multiple of those guys are going to be available, and they're going to be available for cheap, whether it's a late round pick or them just getting flat out released for the 53-man roster. So I don't think it's a bad place to look at all.
No, like you said, I think top to bottom, that is one of the deeper rooms. And they, you know, when you are like 8, 9 guys deep at the position, obviously not all of them are going to make the NFL roster. Somebody's going to be on the outs there. So I think that's an interesting thing to certainly keep an eyes on. That's the room now, especially like with Alan said, with the Titans suffering that injury with DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe that takes them out of the fold for a partner there. But the other thing that we got to see last night, other than just the Texans wide receiver room to keep an eye on, the kickoff actually taking place in a game. Obviously, no longer having to just look at the practice setting for what this is going to look like, actually see it in a game setting. What'd you take away from it? What'd you think?
I thought it was pretty underwhelming, to be perfectly honest. Like, I thought that I think I was a little worried that the NFL teams were going to be afraid of this, and they were all just going to be like, "Nah, we'll just kick it out of the end zone, take it at the 30. It's only 5 extra yards. We're not dealing with all that." And man, I think both teams did a really nice job of keeping guys pinned in. I was talking to Miles Killebrew back in OTAs, and he was like, "We think we can keep people inside the 25-yard line if we make them return it." But that was a think, nobody had done it yet, right? And so now I think having seen it, man, I don't know. I think that seems realistic. I think teams are gonna try to pin people back and take the risk reward and try to get better field position, as you're kicking the ball away. We'll see if somebody can do better with the return game than either the Texans or the Bears did, but I didn't see any big plays. I didn't see any, like, for all the talk about we want to put the excitement back in football, that was like 6 inside handoffs added to the game. That's basically what you got there.
Yeah. I know you guys probably touched on this yesterday on your all's podcast, so we got a chance to see it for the first time in practice yesterday. They spent 2 10-minute periods just on like kickoff, kick return. So I thought that was interesting. But you mentioned like Killebrew telling you like we expect him to pin him inside the 25. I mean, even during, some, I would say like low intensity kind of kickoffs yesterday, it was definitely clear that, they haven't worked on it like a ton, at least in open practice. I didn't see a single kick return from a Steelers player past like the 25. I mean, I know Beanie Bishop had several, quote unquote tackles on kick return yesterday. Both of those that I recall right in front of me were, on like the 22, 23 yard line. So I don't know. I mean, I think we probably won't get the full scope of things until like regular season, because teams don't want to reveal like their quote unquote trick plays. But I do think it'll be more exciting like once we get into the regular season. But for now, I think it's just a bunch of like kind of people not trying to show their hand, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, I hope it's more exciting.
I do think that if defenses are going to try to make people return the ball, then there's a lot less downside for the return teams to start to get more creative and try some more stuff. Like we didn't really see anything other than everybody block a guy and I'm going to run straight ahead. And that's what every kick return was yesterday. I think there's a lot of potential for some overloads, reverses, laterals. Like there's a lot of opportunity for stuff like that in those 10 yards to play out that we didn't really see any of. So I'm totally in agreement that I think as long as teams are not just going to kick it out of the end zone, I think we'll get to see the special teams coaches show off their creativity and see what they can come up with.
So we're 0 for 1 so far in creativity in that department. But again, that was a good point by Derrick with people not wanting to show their hands. Both these teams right now playing the extra game, obviously in the Hall of Fame game. Maybe they just had no desire to reveal what things they have been working on in that setting. All right, let's go to Twitter for some questions now. The Base Yinzer, does Arthur Smith run any empty? And if so, what concepts does he prefer?
Oh, man. All right, that's kind of a loaded question, but I do want to talk about it a little bit. At practice yesterday in 7 shots, the very first play from scrimmage was out of empty. Something you mentioned, Alan, before, too, is like they don't go empty. I think sometimes people confuse empty with like needing to go 5 wide receivers. Like they did empty yesterday twice that I recall out of 13 personnel. So you flex it back out.
Play 4 wide receivers very often.
Yeah. It's usually like, I mean, Smith likes to do it out of 13 personnel where you get 3 tight ends on the field. You flex the back out as well. They did score on that play. They hit Darnell Washington on a little like over the ball route in the middle of the end zone. The other things too, like just in studying his offense over the summer, I couldn't tell you a ton of stuff that he runs. Like there are some simple like quick game. You see a lot of quick game out of empty. He likes to run like double slants and then slant flat on the other side, and usually like the tight end or whoever's attached to the formation on the strong side will like run a sit route over the quarterback like 5 yards or so. I remember specifically he stole a play from Kyle Shanahan that he's ran forever. It's called like fade now, but you put the running back out at the number 1 spot, just runs like a now slant underneath, but you get the slot fade. And with defenses, they typically play, if they're in man coverage, they want them at different levels. So they usually press the slot and then they kind of run that guy off. And then you got a running back on a linebacker. If you like that matchup, you can take it. But there's a lot of good stuff in terms of like what you can do with empty. He was like middle of the pack in terms of usage last year, but it's really good. It's helpful. It gives, quarterbacks really easy reads for like, are they getting man? Are they getting zone? I think it's also like really difficult to pressure out of empty. So if you're getting blitzed a lot, I think it's a good way to, spread teams out, take your matchups. If you got a really good number 1 wide receiver, you can put them at that number 2 on the weak side. That's a good way to get a favorable matchup because most teams won't put the nickel there. There's a lot to do, but with empty, the way that I think of it is like empty's really good if you have a quarterback that you trust a lot or if he's your best player. But if you have a quarterback that's not so good, empty isn't always the best. So to rely on it a lot. So that's kind of like my long-winded answer about like empty in terms of what to expect. We'll see if how much of that we get.
The 2 things I'll add there is when you're doing empty the way Arthur Smith does it, and I agree with you, I think the biggest thing you're going to see is trying to isolate running backs out on that boundary. I think that like when they're going to go empty, that's a big way to do it. I actually saw like somebody run like it was they went to empty and then they ran orbit motion with the running back. So you come in empty and then you bring the running back around the formation. So like I don't know if you want to count that as empty or not because he's kind of in the backfield at the snap, but it's sort of an empty pre-snap look, right? And then the other thing is they can still run the ball out of empty when you have quarterbacks like Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Like they are threats to you can run just quarterback power. You can just run quarterback off tackle. You can run quarterback draws. You can run jet sweeps with your running back. We've seen Jalen Warren do that in the past where he's outside of the formation, then comes back across and takes the handoff and goes. So just because you're empty doesn't mean that you don't have to be balanced. You can be 2-dimensional even out of that formation with no traditional running back. So I think that's definitely a thing that they're going to mix in. And then there's also just going to be a lot of like whether they actually are empty at the snap, a lot of like line up one way, shift another. And when they do that, frequently lining up empty is going to be one of those starting alignments where they come out with nobody in the backfield, take a look at the way the defense is attacking them, and then decide if we want to stick with that or if we want to go to something else.
Yeah. And just like 2 more things. Like one, I was watching some Justin Fields film a couple of days ago. I posted a film breakdown on my channel. But one of the things like the Bears did a couple times that I saw was them running like GT counter with the quarterback. So basically you just pull the guard and the tackle, something we talked about all offseason. The Steelers have a lot of good pullers on the offensive line. Arthur Smith probably needs to incorporate those pullers a little bit more into his scheme. So I think that's a way that you can get guys on the move. And the other thing with empty, kind of like what you're talking about, Alan, like it just gives you a lot of tells pre-snap in terms of like what to expect. And the other thing is like it spreads defenses out. So you do tend to get a lot of light boxes. So the quarterback, he always going to, if you have a runner, he always adds like a +1 advantage in the box for the run game. That's kind of one of the big things of having a mobile guy. So you can get some favorable numbers counts in the box. And then 2, like one more thing that I was going to mention is like, I think that there will be some stuff I hope that's incorporated into Arthur Smith's like quarterback run game if they do go to Justin Fields, because I think it's like absolutely necessary. But we'll just have to see. We'll have to see what all plans out. I don't think we'll see a ton of that hope in the preseason, but maybe if he plays in the regular season.
Yeah, I just want to throw this out there because I think it's funny to imagine. Like you talked about GT counter, which is a play where it's a quarterback run, and you following 2 lead blockers, but usually you have a receiver out on the edge that has to block out or block down one or the other. Can you imagine if that's Jalen Warren out there? like because you came out in regular personnel and then you shifted to empty, and now Jalen Warren or Najee Harris is your lead blocker for your quarterback on a counter. Like that's kind of crazy.
I'm all for it. Let's stick with the Arthur Smith conversation here because we'll switch over to YouTube real quick. Brooklyn commented on a video yesterday about Arthur Smith and had a question about him. We've kind of touched on this in the past, but obviously a lot of people just kind of attaching who he is and his tenure with the Atlanta Falcons as their head coach to what he's going to be as an offensive coordinator. And she said it's entirely possible that he's a good OC and just wasn't a very good head coach, right? And kind of wanted us to elaborate on what could make him successful here.
Yeah, just one more thing, like something we talked about in the Arthur Smith like media scrum yesterday was he was talking a lot about tendencies. So just kind of like back to the empty thing one more time is like NFL teams typically will only handle like or carry like 1 or 2 empty checks into a week. So like that's another way like to get a really good tendency of like what the defense is going to do. So like if you know they've only, so for example, like if you know they only play 2 different coverages when you go to empty, whether it's man or you have some sort of man match, like that's a really good tell for, okay, we know we can get in this formation and we can attack them. We can have a good play drawn up for this specific defense. But I do think that like she's onto something there. I mean, like being a head coach and being an offensive coordinator are 2 completely separate things. Now, I think that there is some necessary context in that, like he was also the offensive coordinator and play caller for Atlanta, and those offenses weren't good enough. But I do think that being able to focus all of your time on one side of the ball and not have to worry about doing the, the managerial stuff, kind of the, as the head coach, like you're the face of an organization. Like he's not the face of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's, Mike Tomlin's job. So I do think that there's, something to be said for that. And also like think too, like unlike previous hires that they've had, I think Smith at least having 2 years, granted it was 4 or 5 years ago, him having 2 years of like proven NFL success at least means a lot for me because it gives me a little bit of evidence that like, hey, he can actually do this. It's just, can he get back to doing what he did best? And like, can he evolve to stay up with the current NFL defensive trends? But yeah, I do think it's a good thing worth mentioning that, it's 2 different job titles.
Yeah, I think we've seen lots of times across the NFL, plenty of examples of guys that made really good coordinators that didn't make very good coaches head coaches for one reason or another. I think the job of a head coach is a lot more about personality and leadership than it is tactical X's and O's ability. And I think the job of the offense, you can flip that exactly on its head. For offensive coordinator, I think it's exactly the opposite. There are plenty of people that don't have the personality or the temperament for head coaching, that maybe don't have the leadership for head coaching that really understand football at an advanced level and can make the X's and O's work in a way that it was special and different. And I think one of the things you're seeing a lot of in this sort of, as the like Shanahan and McVay trees have been mined for head coaches across the league, I think we're seeing plenty of examples of guys that may or may not be great offensive minds that are not necessarily great head coaches. That doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. And there's many ways you can organize a football team. The reason that those guys get to be head coaches is because that's how you have to promote them to get them. But it doesn't mean that that's their best role. Like I look at a guy like, lots of these guys in his coaching trees, like Zach Taylor. I think he's a pretty okay coach. Like, yeah, hasn't had a lot of success. Like, this isn't like some crazy, but like, if he doesn't work out as a head coach, he's going to go right back to being a pretty good offensive coordinator. I would say right away. Like, there are plenty of examples like that where you get promoted because somebody else wants you, not necessarily because you need to be promoted to do what it was you were doing. So I think there's a lot of that in football. I absolutely think Arthur Smith could be one of those guys. And man, like me and Smitty were saying yesterday, I think people in Pittsburgh are really going to like him. I know the players really like him. I think he's going to fit in really well. So I think from a personality standpoint, like I think he's a really good fit for the Steelers.
Yeah. It's just like one more thing on that. Like, I just go back to the time thing. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day that you can work, right? And like one of the things that he talked about, we got to talk with him yesterday, was talking with him a little bit about the pistol and like kind of where he got that. And like he was talking about, he got it from kind of a lot of college teams are running it and stuff like that. And like that's a big thing. A lot of people don't realize this until they hear coaches talk about it, but football is such like a copycat league. Like there's not really anything new, but like even guys at the NFL level, they're frequently pulling stuff from like the college ranks to put into their system, put into their scheme. And that's what he did really 2 years ago with the pistol, because he had Marcus Mariota, who had a lot of success at Oregon with that. But like going back to the time things, like when you're not a head coach, you don't have to spend as much time, on the head coaching duties, being the face of the franchise. You can go back to just studying ball all the time. And like, that's what I'm most excited about, to see, like, what is he going to bring that's new to the table that we haven't seen before. And that's why I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about what maybe he can conjure up.
Absolutely. Let's stick on the offensive side here. New Era Golf said, let's get an update on Broderick Jones. Seems like he's still in a position battle. Thought he would have kind of taken it by the horns a little more. Anything to be concerned with there?
We'll let you take that one, Alan.
I think Broderick Jones got banged up earlier this week, so he's been a little limited since then. Like, he hasn't been doing a lot of the one-on-one drills between the offensive lineman and the defensive lineman, but he's mostly been playing right tackle, a little bit of left early, not so much. Certainly, I think none since he banged his elbow in that first padded practice. But I think he's looked pretty good. I don't see any concerns. It's a little odd, I've been trying to get some time with Pat Meyer here. I'm hoping to over the weekend. It's not quite sure what the plan, clear to me what the plan is here. I think Broderick Jones looks good. They're giving Troy Fautanu reps. I think he looks okay too. I'm not sure where we're headed with this offensive line battle right now. My assumption was that we were going to see a lot of Broderick Jones at left tackle. I think he's been good, and we haven't seen that. So I'm not quite sure how that adds up right now.
Yeah. I think it's tough. Like, yesterday was my first practice actually seeing it in person, and them not being in pads, it's difficult to get a really good gauge on like how the offensive line's performing. But yeah, I mean, that was something that I kind of asked a couple of days ago, was like, I don't really understand the direction of like what we're doing on the offensive line over here. I don't really understand. It seems like he's the right tackle, but he's also the swing tackle. And, Dan Moore's like only playing on the left. Troy's only playing on the right. But I don't know how that's going to shift. Does this mean like we're probably likely to see Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle, you think, Alan, to start the season? Or do you actually think that like eventually it's going to be Broderick at left and Troy at right early in the season?
My feeling about this is that it's a two-man battle between Dan Moore and Troy Fautanu, with Broderick Jones playing with the winner, whoever that happens to be, wherever it is.
Do you think that's a good approach?
No, because Broderick Jones has barely played left tackle in the NFL, and like, I think he'll be fine over there, but I would like to see some more reps for him. Like, that's the part of this that's concerning to me, is that if it's so, I guess if if they think Dan Moore is way ahead of Troy Fautanu, then what they're doing right now is fine, in that Broderick Jones probably doesn't need a million practice reps if he's going to be playing right tackle. You may as well get the rookie some work, and they'll be fine. But if the thought is that Fautanu has a real shot of passing Dan Moore and starting, then Broderick Jones needs to be doing some left tackle.
What's your take on that, Smitty?
Yeah, I don't know that I could add anything. I would have liked to have seen more Broderick at left tackle up to this point, and hopefully we get there in the very near future. Because what does Dan Moore even look like to you, Alan, from a practice perspective? I know they haven't had many days of pads, but
I mean, the same guy. It's all.
Yeah.
He's not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
he's not going to change. I mean,
sure. Yeah, I don't know what we're doing either. Hopefully you do get to have that conversation with Pat Meyer, and we can get a little bit more clarity in terms of what the path is for everybody here, because when they kick off in Atlanta, I would love for it to be Troy on the right, Broderick on the left, and let's just roll with what we think is the future.
I think that probably I still think that's what's going to happen. I'm just unsure about why we're taking the path that we're on right now.
Yeah. I mean, because would him, bumping his elbow really, if he's still getting reps at the right side, why would that affect him on the left side? They feel like why would that be the reason? It wouldn't be.
No, I mean, I guess it's just an excuse to get Fautanu some more reps, but it's not an excuse to take away Jones's left tackle reps, to me. Like, I think that's and that's the other part. Even if, okay, Fautanu's way behind Moore, and we think it's going to be Moore left, Jones right, Jones is still the backup left tackle. He still needs some reps over there. I don't understand why they've been so few and far between. He worked way more at left tackle in OTAs and minicamp than he has. Like in OTAs and minicamp, he was 50-50 left and right. Like that made sense. We have not seen that since we got here in training camp.
Yeah. I don't know. I would feel better about, like, I understand. Like, I do think that some of the struggles last year probably can be attributed to a position switch. You go to left side, you go from the left side to the right side. You're basically playing left-handed with one hand behind your back as a rookie, and just rookie tackles tend to suck. And Broderick was a little bit raw from a technical perspective anyway. So it's not like I was expecting him to just come in and just light the world on fire in general. But like, for someone that did have more than his fair share of struggles in pass protection on the right side, I'm pretty scared about like what this is going to look like if they ask him to switch back over to left at a position that he's barely played this summer. I guess my thing is, like, are we sure that they're actually doing what they should be doing to set him up for success? And when I think about, like, you have a first round pick, someone you've clearly invested a lot in, and you literally need to take a big jump this year if this offense is going to take a big jump with it. I'm just not sure that they're putting him in the best position to succeed. But that's just, I don't know. Like I said, I don't personally understand the direction here that we're headed.
Hopefully we get more clarity in the very near future. Let's switch to the opposite side of the ball there. Derek, one of my takeaways from the 2 days that I was there was just how good, how fluid, how easy Payton Wilson moved. We got a question about Payton Wilson. You got to see him firsthand. Now, obviously, they didn't wear pads yesterday. Friday Night Lights will be a different story, so hopefully we can hear back on this. But Jared said, "What's up, fellas? Thanks for the coverage. Thoughts on Payton Wilson and how he's meshing with the defense? Do you think that he's living up to the hype that he's gotten / impressing?"
Yeah, I mean, E-Rob didn't really practice very much yesterday. He was mostly like a bystander, no pads again, so it's a little bit difficult. They didn't do really they did one run period that lasted maybe 5 minutes. But in terms of like in pass coverage, he had one ball that I remember he got like a fingertip on that ended up still getting completed. And then Fields kind of lofted one over him over the middle of the field. And that's kind of like one of the things I want to try to pay more attention to tonight and tomorrow. The final couple of days I'm here is to try to see like what his feel is like in coverage, because, being fast and having good athleticism is definitely, that's a positive strength for what you're looking for in terms of if you want to get him on the field as a downbacker. But I just want to see like, what's his spatial awareness look like? How quickly is he reading the game? How well does he understand like route concepts? When I was talking to Patrick Queen, like that was something that he said that, was a huge adjustment for him, like early in, his days in Baltimore when he was like playing like Mike linebacker, was just the amount of like 3-man route concepts that he was being introduced to that he had never seen before at the NFL level was a huge transition for him. So that stuff takes time. And I always think that like the pass game stuff takes a little bit more time for linebackers than the run game stuff. But I do think that they're, just from an athleticism standpoint, he looked the part. I didn't really get to see him open up like I did PQ yesterday. But I'm optimistic. It seems like everybody who's been there every day has had nothing but good things to say about how he's progressing.
Very specifically in response to this question, I think the hype train on Payton Wilson has gotten a little bit ahead of reality in some places. Like there are people talking about defensive rookie of the year, and I'm like,
that would be tough.
He's barely gonna play at the beginning of the season. Like, he's gonna get playing time, but like it's not gonna be a ton. I think he's gonna play in the dime. I think he's gonna play when they go nickel in obvious passing situations. I can't imagine taking Landon Roberts off the field on 1st and 10. Like, it's just not happening. And so the playing time is not going to be extensive at the beginning. I think that's pretty clear. He looks good. I think some people's expectations have gotten a little out of whack. Like, he's not a big, like, in terms of like thick muscle, he's like this tall, slender athlete linebacker. Like, like he's not the guy I want like running downhill into Derrick Henry like 5 times a game like that. Like, they got 2 other guys to do that, and so I think he's going to have a role, and I think he's going to be like, in terms of guys you're excited about playing as dime linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers, like he's the first one in a long time where I think you feel like really good about the chances of this working out pretty well, maybe even right away. But like, Smitty and I have talked about this before. Last year at the beginning of the year, Joey Porter was the dime DB. He was getting like 8 snaps a game. They don't play that much dime. Like it's going to take some time to grow into the role there. But I think he looks really good. Like I haven't seen any reason to not feel good about the prospect of the player. I just think what the team needs is him to have a pretty limited role at first and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think you get like the gradual ramp up, right? Like he starts playing a little bit of dime, and then maybe, if you get certain formations from the offense, maybe he can start playing some nickel or maybe some like second down stuff. And then, over time, maybe he does take it in as a starter. But Smitty, I know you and I are like both really high on E-Rob in general, and like his pairing with Patrick Queen. I think those guys have a really unique kind of stylistic meshing that I'm really excited about. So it is interesting. I do think that, maybe some people's expectations definitely are getting a little bit wonky, but even like with the fit of Wilson and Queen, like both those guys they're speed guys, really rangy. Probably their best work really comes as like gap shooters and trying to win with quickness against blocks rather than take them on with physicality, which is more of Robert's speed. But it'll be interesting to see. I think for a 3rd round pick that they got, with a comp pick, I mean, he's got about as much upside at the linebacker position as you probably could hope for. It's just a matter of, staying healthy, one, and then just gradually putting it together.
Yeah, I think it's 2 different conversations. Like Alan's saying, I think a lot of people are probably getting a little bit over their heads in terms of the 2024 role, but you can certainly be excited about what he's going to do long term and the projection that's there with him.
Are you telling me people are overreacting to training camp vids? You're not.
I think people have been overreacting to Payton Wilson since they drafted him. I think it was before. And it's not because I don't think he's a good prospect. I just look at the linebackers and say, hey, this guy, it's very similar to Keeanu Benton last year. Like I was fired up about the Steelers drafting Keeanu Benton. Like this kid's going to be a star, but also he's not going to play over Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi as a rookie. Like both of those 2 things can be true. Like, it's the same way.
Speaking of training camp videos,
we got a Keanu Benton question too. Came in late, but
I gotta talk about one training camp video that I saw, just because it cracked me up. So something that's been talked about a lot is just how slow Russ's drop back was. I saw someone, I don't know who it was, and I'm not trying to call nobody out, but I saw someone tweet a video of how fast he looked in his drop on a screen pass yesterday. I have never in my life seen anything more preposterous on Twitter, but I just had to get that out there. That was pretty funny. But
I love it. I love the overreactions to training camp videos. Alan, you mentioned Keanu Benton, that question. That's the last one that we'll take here then. Who's literally, that is the person's name, who's said, haven't heard anything about Benton, would love an update on how he's looking and doing so far, obviously expecting a big year 2 leap.
What did you see from him, Derek, yesterday? I know no pads, but
yeah, I mean, no pads. I mean, there was some interior pressure yesterday, and he was a part of that. Just getting to Fields early in like some of the passing game situations. But yeah, I mean, it's always hard for me to gauge stuff, without pads and in the trenches. I mean, that's something that I'm going to be looking forward to, tonight and tomorrow. But I'm pretty bullish on Benton, man. Like I think his rookie season was underrated. I know you mentioned that you were pretty confident that he wasn't going to play over Larry or Cam as a rookie, but I think you can make a pretty strong, like not just like statistical argument, but also like a film argument that he should have gotten more snaps last year, and he should be getting like. I said this the other day on Twitter because I think I may have wrote something about Benton recently for the site, but I'm pretty bullish on him, and I think it would be like legitimate coaching malpractice if he doesn't outsnap Ogunjobi this year. And that's nothing, like I think Ogunjobi's a fine starter, but I think like when they go to some of their nickel stuff and on like 2nd and 3rd down, I think he has an argument to be the Steelers' best interior pass rusher already. And that's including Cam Hayward, unless we see like some more like maybe a rejuvenation of his, burst off the ball. So I think a big snap count uptick is warranted for Ogunjobi, or for Benton, excuse me. So yeah, I'm ahead of that hype train for sure.
Yeah, I think Keanu will play more nickel and dime than at least one of Cam and Larry, and maybe both this year. The one thing we saw when Cam Hayward came back when he wasn't healthy was that he was still just fine against the run, but the pass rush,
legitimately good.
Yeah, the pass rush was lacking. So I think we'll probably I'll wait and see what I feel like where Cam Hayward is in terms of his pass rush, until I get a couple more practices in. But let's just say, Cam Hayward's pass rush ability is somewhere between what we saw in 2022 and what we saw in 2023. I think that's a reasonable expectation. He's not going to be as good as he was before the injury, not as bad as he was when he was playing hurt. I think I still want Keeanu Benton in there over that. And there's no reason not to give a 35-year-old limited reps. It's time. The defensive linemen can play a long time, but they don't need to be playing 70% of their team snaps to do it. And so I would say at the very worst, you're going to see even reps between those three, but I think you're going to see Keeanu second or first by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what you drafted Keeanu for, right? He's kind of the succession plan, even if he is going to play, zero tech. He's kind of the succession plan for your interior defensive line. Have him play a significant chunk of snaps. I mean, I'm looking for the stat that I had yesterday, but I think the stat is on second and third down, or on third down last year, Ogunjobi nearly tripled Benton's stats. Just in terms of pass rush opportunities. If that happens this year, I'm going to blow a gasket on Twitter, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm going to blow a gasket because there's just no excuse for it. I think Benton's his burst off the ball, just how strong he is. And I really think there's a lot more meat on the bone, as Tomlin would say, in terms of getting him to, take another significant jump.
Love it. All right. Yeah, we appreciate all the questions. Keep those coming, of course. We got some that we didn't get to, so maybe we can carry them over the next time we do one of these. I will bookmark them so we keep them in the chamber. Derrick, tell the people where they could find you other than, at Friday Night Lights practice, on Twitter, ready to blow a gasket if Keeanu Benton doesn't outsnap or outpass rush attempt Larry Ogunjobi, those types of things.
Yep, at Steelers_DB on Twitter and YouTube, and then all of my written work, including my takeaways from yesterday's training camp practice, can be found at SteelersNow.com.
We getting the takeaways each day?
Oh, yeah.
There we go. All right, Alan?
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now, the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Sign up using promo code Allen10, get $10 off for all the best stuff for myself, Derrick, and the rest of the team at SteelersNow.com. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notification on the YouTube channel. Derrick and I will be back with another video after practice tonight, so stay tuned for that. And then again tomorrow.
Ooh, a nighttime edition of the practice
report. And then I'll be back Monday morning with another episode of Steelers Morning Rush, which is now available anywhere you can find podcasts, just like this show.
That's big. For the people that didn't want to look at you, that's big.
I know it's big. It's the less of my face that's involved in this process, the better for everyone.
Alan, you didn't say the one thing, so I guess I'll say it. Read the words so he can get paid.
There you go. Yep, please.
Also, if you are not watching on YouTube and you are listening, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. You can find us right there. Follow us on TikTok, Steelers Afternoon Drive. Follow me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Derrick Bell, Alan Saunders, and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.